IRS Forensic Investigations, Chad Thomas, joins us now for more on the story. Chad, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. So today we saw the burial of Marius van der Merwe, who was an owner of a private security company. Yesterday we lost DJ Warras, also again someone who was running their own private security company. Is there a worry within this sector with regards to the loss of life that we are now apparently seeing more and more by the day?
Very good evening to you and to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me onto the show. It's an extremely distressing time for people that work within the security cluster, whether it's in private law enforcement or public law enforcement. We've seen whistleblowers taken out, witnesses taken out, police officers taken out, and now security industry members are being taken out. I was at Marius van der Merwe's funeral earlier today, and there was a sense of disbelief that yesterday another high-profile murder took place of somebody that's involved very closely with sensitive private security issues.
And I mean, the brazenness in which these young lives have been taken out, what do you think we are missing as a country or just as a criminal justice system in ensuring that people don't act out so selflessly?
True what you say about the young lives. Marius van der Merwe was 42 and Warras was 40. They were just really getting going in their professions, in their careers. They were beginning to peak, and they both left behind so much. If you look at Marius, he left behind 4 children. You look at Warras, he left behind 3 children, and it's devastating. It's devastating for our industry as well, because we meant to be there as force multipliers in support of the police to try keep criminals at bay. And we've all known that criminality is a massive problem in South Africa and that so many people have been targeted. But now that security companies are being drawn into the fray, companies that are trying to provide protection, and in some instances fighting rival companies, because the security industry has become such a monetized industry, it's just leaves us with a sense of disbelief about what's going on around us at the moment.
You speak about rival companies. Are they bad actors within this sector, and how much of an infiltration are you seeing with regards to those bad actors and rival companies fighting amongst themselves?
It's a massive problem. We've got 2 problems within the security industry. The one is unregistered security companies posting unregistered security officers, both of which are criminal offenses, because now you have people that are not registered, not being paid correctly, looking after your premises, and there's no background vetting done on these individuals. And these companies get chosen by clients because they come in and they undercut other companies. And then the second problem you have are the bad actors that deliberately come into the security space so they can access legitimate weapons. So we've seen organized crime syndicates using proxies and nominees to buy existing security companies just to get access to the firearms so that they can legitimize their illicit activities, be it extortion, be it mafia style, be it protection rackets, etc. And it really has become a problem. We saw it emerge in KZN, where taxi owners were buying up security companies to fight proxy wars against other taxi owners. And we've now seen security companies even renting out security officers, as is in Kabi. It's a frightening development, and it's something that the authorities need to address urgently.
And talking about those authorities that need to address this, what role then should CIRA be playing in terms of increasing its own capacity so that enough oversight is provided for such?
CIRA, as the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, is the custodian of the Private Security Industry Regulation Act. Ultimately, the board of CIRA answers to the Department of Police, and the Deputy Minister of Police sits on the board of CIRA. So security officers are not just force multipliers, they actually fall under the same management structures as others when it comes to political oversight. So it's a key environment that CIRA needs to manage as the custodian of the act. And CIRA is trying. CIRA is a mammoth organization looking after most probably the biggest industry in the private sector. You're talking about over 2 million registered security officers, of which between 600,000 and 800,000 are active. And where I think CIRA may be falling short is not having sufficient capacity when it comes to inspectors. They have an inspectorate, and those inspectors, unlike other regulatory authorities, actually have full peace officer status. So they can make arrests, they can investigate. They also have a prosecution team. Sam Chauke, who heads up CIRA, has been trying to expand the role played by these inspectors, and they don't have a shortage of money because every single registered security company and security officer contributes towards CIRA on a monthly and on an annual basis. So CIRA needs to increase 30, 40, 50 times the amount of inspectors they have just to keep up with the sheer volume of registered private security officers and security companies in South Africa.
So with both the private and the public sector in terms of security in the country, what do you think is really missing when it comes to winning the fight against crime?
There needs to be more formal partnerships in the short term. We have partnerships and memorandums of understanding. BAXA, which is Business Against Crime South Africa, has established the E2 project, which is a formalized partnership between police and security companies. There's organizations like the CCIN that have active joint coordinated centers on the ground. We call them JOCs. So it is happening, but it's not formalized to the point where these force multipliers are being effectively utilized. And just like SAPS has been infiltrated by bad actors, so has the security industry. But SAPS has become very reliant on the security industry, as has suburbia and moneyed individuals and moneyed communities. They make use of security companies that fulfill the functions of the police. They patrol suburbia, they look after national key points. And I think this is where the challenge lies. Is you're talking about the public sector that's doing it from a constitutionally mandated perspective. You're talking about the private sector that's doing it for a profit initiative. They are profit-driven companies. Security companies don't establish themselves as non-profits to help the communities. They establish themselves as a profit-making business. And that's why we're seeing these bad actors emerging, simply because there is such a huge industry that they'd like to have a piece of, and also because the industry makes use of firearms that they want to have access to.
And speaking of those firearms, I mean, what would you suggest about the flow of these illegal firearms, and what strategies could be effective in curbing this?
The security industry needs firearms. There's no way that you can have cash in transit without protection, that you can have national key points without protection, the protection provided by well-trained security officers carrying firearms. So we can never, ever eliminate the need for firearms. We just have to monitor very closely the purchasing of companies, and we need to involve the SSA more with the vetting of the people that are purchasing security companies. CIPC has to come on board with CIRA to identify ultimate beneficial ownership, because we're finding security companies are being fronted by individuals that are working for masterminds who themselves are involved in criminal activities. And having security companies at their disposal means that they have their own private militias that they can use to settle scores, drive around like the president with these armed escorts in these white light cavalcades, and use them for extortionary measures, which that's obviously not the use of the security industry.
Earlier on, the Western Cape released some of their interim numbers, and at the helm of these are taxi and gang-related incidences that contribute to a lot of these contact crimes. How would you elaborate on how criminal organizations leverage on private security companies in order to advance their interests, especially when it comes to turf wars?
I've seen it firsthand. You'll see a well-known businessman driving with a convoy of so-called bodyguards, and he'll have a beef with another businessman who also has a cavalcade of bodyguards, and they will literally use these two groups of security officers to fight a proxy war for them. You'll find that with these so-called business forums that are taking over construction sites, water sites, and other projects, using security companies as the force measure to be able to exert themselves. You're seeing it with the hijacking of buildings, where bad actors within the security industry are being used to influence who can stay in those buildings, who can't stay in those buildings, at the behest of the building hijackers themselves. It's a terrible situation that one finds oneself in when one sees the bad actors that are trying to take control of an industry that is working so hard with the police to try curb crime in this country.
And this current crisis, Chad, I mean, what could be attributed to some of the weaknesses within our criminal justice system, especially with seeing these low conviction rates when it comes to a lot of these crimes?
So now we're moving across to something completely different, and it's a subject that I'm very invested in, and that is reported crimes that result in convictions, not enrolled crimes that result in convictions. Let me explain the difference. If you talk about reported crimes, that's crimes that are reported to the police and are investigated. Then you talk about enrolled crimes. Those are crimes that have been investigated that the NPA now believe should be enrolled in court because there's a prospect of a successful prosecution. Now, the difference there is significant. If you ask the NPA about their success in terms of conviction rates, they'll come with a very high percentage. What they're not telling you is that relates to cases that have been enrolled. In other words, well investigated, that they feel confident they're going to win. The majority of cases never reach that stage. They are never sufficiently investigated to make a prosecutor confident enough to enroll them. So if you look at the murder statistics in terms of convictions from the NPA compared to the murder statistics of SAPS, of cases that are registered, the disparity is huge. You're looking at murder cases of only 10 to 12% that are solved. In other words, it results in a prosecution, and that's because the majority of the cases are not enrolled. With rape, it's even worse. Only 5% of reported cases will ever result in prosecution. And therein lies this massive problem we have in South Africa. There's no consequences. And when there's no consequences, you can't hold people to account. And those people that aren't held to account become so much more emboldened.
They certainly do. But what do you think then, Chad, with regards to those enrolled crimes? Why are we not getting most of our cases there? Is it a skill set issue?
It is. And we hear a lot of disingenuous figures. So a minister of police will tell us, for example, there's 10,000 more boots on the ground. It's not more boots on the ground because during that year, there's been natural attrition. Members have resigned, members have retired, members have passed away. They've been medically boarded. You get 10,000 fresh members out of the police colleges across the country, and they are now expected to not just perform normal policing functions, but also take up where detectives have left. Last year, 350 new members were appointed in the Hawks. Not one of them was an experienced detective. They all came straight from police college. It doesn't make sense that you have a newbie straight out of police college investigating complex crimes. They don't have a network, they don't understand the system as yet, and they haven't had the interaction in court that experienced members have had. So there's a massive skills deficit when it comes to the detective side of policing.
Lastly, Chad, what would you then say are some of those comprehensive reforms that we would need as a country in order for us to be able to restore that integrity and accountability, especially within the security system?
We must be the most resolute nation on the planet because for 25 years, our police have been infiltrated and slowly but surely it has been decaying. There's been a deficit of leadership. With what's coming out of Madlanga Commission, what's coming out of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, what's coming out of other commissions of inquiry are indicative of a service that has been in trouble yet has managed to survive. We're not a failed state and we haven't been captured. So we just have to work on where the successes are, replicate those successes, look at units that are successful, replicate those units, and for the short term, make use of the private sector because the private sector are willing and able to assist the justice cluster.
All right, Chad Thomas, thank you so much for your time this evening and for joining us. That's Chad Thomas from the IRS Forensic Investigator speaking to us about the security cluster and really what needs to be done in order for there to be integrity and accountability that is restored within that sector.